Hello, welcome to another quarantine homily. So today's gospel reading was from the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John. And I guess John is finally done with all that bread of life stuff. Thank goodness. It was getting a little stale. And now he's on to Good Shepherd imagery. And this is going to last a while too. I looked ahead at the next few readings, and it's going to be Good Shepherd stuff for the next few days. So today's reading, Jesus is saying, I am the Good Shepherd. I will lay down my life for my sheep. A good shepherd is different than a hired hand. Somebody who's hired to watch the sheep. Because the moment the wolf comes, the hired hand's going to run away. But the good shepherd knows his sheep, loves his sheep, is going to stick around and will lay down his life for his sheep. So I was trying to think of some modern day images that kind of illustrate the difference between the hired hand and the good shepherd. And, what came to mind was the human trafficking business, where people will pay to be smuggled in to, to the United States from Mexico or someplace else, and they will pay exorbitant amounts of money, maybe their whole life savings, for the hope of a better life, and they'll pay it to somebody called a coyote. And it's a very interesting word when you're talking about a shepherd. It's kind of like the fox in the hen house. The coyote is paid to shepherd them across the border. The coyote knows the terrain. The coyote knows the risks, knows how to avoid the risks, gives them the best shot to cross the border. But a coyote is in it for the money. And if danger is on the horizon, if it looks like the authorities are closing in, the coyote will disappear, leaving the people stranded. If they're in the desert, they'll leave them stranded. There's some warnings, I guess, in when I was researching this a little bit in pamphlets, in Mexico that talk about the dangers of a coyote, and if you do use one, never ever let the coyote out of your sight. You can't afford them to leave you. They're the only ones that know the way. And there was a story a while back about a semi that had a bunch of people in it that had died. They were being smuggled across the border, and I don't know what exactly happened, but I imagine, what happened was that the coyote ran away because he thought that he was in danger of getting caught, and the people were trapped inside the semi, and, they died from heat exhaustion, I imagine. So that's a coyote. The hired hand that's meant to do this work of shepherding. It doesn't always end well for the sheep. And I'd like to contrast that with an image of, sort of a modern day good shepherd. And that would be the image of Harriet Tubman. Now, I know we're talking about the Bible. Modern day is a little, there's a little freedom in the steering, okay? But Harriet Tubman did the same work. She smuggled people across the border. She was an escaped slave herself, and she returned to free other slaves by, just like the coyotes, through the what was called the Underground Railroad. She led them to freedom, but very risky work. You know, if she would have caught, they all would. If she would have got caught, they all would have died, and she probably would have been tortured to death. And she didn't do it for the money, obviously. She did it because she was committed to the people. But, you know, there is an interesting side of Harriet Tubman, too, that I thought was very interesting, is she carried a pistol. And that pistol was in case they got into trouble. You know, she used it to defend her people, to defend her sheep against the forces that wanted them captured or dead. But she also used that pistol to force her sheep to move along, because the journey was going to be difficult. And she knew that people were going to get cold feet. You know, they'd be halfway into the trip and they'd want to turn back. You know, it's kind of like the story of Moses and, you know, leading the Israelite slaves out of Egypt. You know, they get into the desert and they're starting to regret what they did. You know, they said, it's better if at least I had food in Egypt, and here you led me into the desert to die. And so, you know, she knew that the people that she was, you know, taking on this journey to freedom were going to get cold feet, and some of them would want to turn back. And she never allowed it. And she used that pistol to never allow it. You know, she said, you move along or you die. That's the deal. You know, there's a famous saying she used to say, you know, dead men tell no tales. You know, I can't have you going back and, you know, having them torture you till you spill the beans on where everybody is and where all our hiding places is. We can't have it. So you move along or you die. And as far as I know, there's no record that she ever killed anybody. She just threatened it. Because at the end of her life, she said, proudly, she said, you know, one thing I can say, as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, my train never went off the track and I never lost a passenger. That's a very different image than the coyote. You know? The Good Shepherd, and I know this is going to come up in the readings to follow, like Harriet Tubman, one person would be too many, and she would be willing to lay down her life to save one person. My train never went off the track, and I never lost a single passenger. And so when I was thinking about that in the image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, you know, what can we count on? You know, I guess from Jesus. An easy journey to freedom? No. You know, using Harriet Tubman as a good metaphor for that. You know, she didn't guarantee them an easy passage, but she guaranteed them she would not leave them, that she would be with them through it all. She would give of her food if they were hungry, and you know, she would give of her warm clothing if they were cold, you know, but she wouldn't let them turn back, and she wouldn't leave them. And I think that's a good image for God. You know, this journey through life, it ain't easy. Half the time you want to turn back, and yet you're compelled, you're pushed. You know, God doesn't promise that it's going to be easy. God just promises to be with us. You know, and it's a good image for how we imitate the Good Shepherd. We don't take away people's suffering. We can't walk the road for them. You know, but it means an awful lot to them that we're willing to stay with them through it all. So that's some reflections on this reading about the Good Shepherd.